From Frodo nearly turning into Gollum, to Aragorn physically facing Sauron at the Black Gate. These are 10 deleted scenes that never made it to the screen, and every single one of them would have changed how you see these films. Arwen is defined by stillness and sacrifice. She waits, she grieves. Jackson apparently filmed an entirely different version of that character. In that scene, she was meant to be a warrior, and that changes everything about how you read her relationship with Aragorn. The entire emotional weight of her storyline shifts. The reason it was cut comes down to a fundamental storytelling problem that Jackson recognized too late. Arwen's power in the narrative comes from her vulnerability and her choice to surrender immortality for love. The moment you put her on a battlefield, that vulnerability evaporates, so he pulled her out, almost completely. Jackson pulled her off the battlefield to protect what she meant to the story. But the battlefield itself, the entire world these characters were fighting for, almost looked completely different from the very first frame. The original prologue was conceived as a sweeping glimpse of Middle-earth before the shadow fell. Lothlorien in its prime, elves moving through ancient forests in a civilization that felt eternal. Then Khazad-dûm, alive, thunderous with industry, dwarves mining and crafting within a kingdom of immense scale and ambition. What stings most is how little of that we truly saw. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Moria appears only after its downfall, a tomb of darkness, bones and silence, where a great city once stood. You understand the loss, but you don't feel its life. The tragedy here is one of restraint. Jackson built a vast world, yet chose to reveal it in fragments, trusting suggestion over full immersion. And across the trilogy, that choice largely worked. Still, it's hard not to wish for more. A deeper introduction to Moria could have made its fall even more devastating. We only glimpsed its former richness and grandeur in the opening of the Hobbit trilogy, hinting at what once was, but never fully living in it. That lost vision of Middle-earth sets the stakes for everything that follows, and nowhere were those stakes more personal than in the storyline Jackson built around Arwen, and then quietly dismantled. The deeper you look, the more it feels like the final version was built around something missing. Aragorn and Arwen's breakup was filmed for Fellowship, not Two Towers. That changes everything. Arwen would have spent most of the Two Towers having already chosen to leave, until a vision in Lothlorien pulls her back. And once you step back from Arwen's lost arc, you start to notice something even bigger underneath it. Because it's not just relationships or emotional threads that were reshaped, it's the way the story originally handled death itself. In the original version, Sauron singles him out, lifts him off the ground, and burns him alive with his bare hand. For anyone who understands Gil-galad's importance, that moment is brutal. Actor Mark Ferguson even said in an interview that he was shocked it got cut, since his role felt central. But the issue was pacing. Elendil also dying in the same sequence, adding another major death would have overwhelmed the audience. So the scene was removed, but it was filmed. The original forging scene was meant to feel raw and ritualistic. Sauron doesn't simply cast the ring. He shapes molten gold with his bare hands, as if the heat is nothing. Then he takes a dagger and deliberately draws his own blood, letting it pour into the metal. Rather than being merely energized by Sauron, the ring is a physical extension of his very being. That changes everything. It turns the One Ring from a magical object into something almost alive, like an open wound. Anyone who wears it is in direct contact with Sauron's blood. It was likely cut for tone. The prologue needed more scale and clarity. And this version felt too dark and disturbing for a general audience, but traces of it remain. In the final film, Sauron is still holding a dagger, which is seemingly an odd detail unless you know what was originally planned, quietly left behind in plain sight. Once you realize what the ring actually is in that version, everything that follows feels a lot more disturbing. The scene was meant to happen when Frodo snaps at Faramir. In that moment, Faramir briefly sees Frodo transformed into Gollum. The purpose was clear. Faramir is already unsure about letting Frodo go, and this vision pushes that doubt further. He's no longer guessing what the ring might do, he's seeing it happen. If it stayed, it would have changed how audiences saw Frodo for the rest of the film. That image would linger in every scene, and it reframes everything that came before, every moment Frodo resisted, every time he snapped at Sam, every step toward Mordor. He wasn't just carrying a burden, he was already losing. Jackson cut it for being too direct, but that's exactly what made it powerful. That image, Frodo becoming what he's trying to destroy, is exactly the kind of horror Jackson usually kept just out of frame. But there's one deleted scene where he didn't hold back at all, where Sauron himself steps forward in the flesh to face Aragorn directly. Peter Jackson's team struggled with how to present Sauron at the Black Gate, resulting in at least 2 contradictory deleted scenes. The first version featured Sauron appearing as a blazing figure of light, so overwhelming that every soldier except Aragorn was paralyzed in awe. Some fans interpret this as his Anatar version, the form he used to deceive the elves. The second version was more physical, showing Sauron in full armor, engaging Aragorn in a one-on-one fight. Although Aragorn managed to stab him, Sauron was only destroyed by the ring's destruction, which caused his body to explode. Both scenes were cut because they clashed with the film's established narrative, which portrayed Sauron's power as overwhelming, unseen, and purely conceptual. He works best as a weight you feel, not a figure you see. But while Jackson was pulling the enemy back into the shadows, he was also rethinking what it meant for the defenders to stand up at all. The speech Theoden gave was powerful. Bernard Hill delivered it to a room of hopeless men and children being handed armor and weapons they barely understood, and somehow made it feel like they could actually hold the wall. That was the issue. Everything leading into Helm's Deep was built on hopelessness. Civilians hiding, farmers turned into soldiers, Aragorn quietly realizing they wouldn't survive. The film needed that weight to sit with the audience, so Jackson held the speech back. That speech gave the men of Rohan something to hold on to. But there's a deleted scene that shows what Helm's Deep looked like for everyone who wasn't given a weapon, and what one woman did when the enemy came to them anyway. This sequence starts before the Uruks even reach the caves. Éowyn is already kneeling in the dark, hands covered in blood, assisting a woman to give birth while the battle rages outside. Then the Uruks break in. She's still in her dress with bloody hands and no armor on, and fights back fiercely. In fact, she beheads one of the Uruk-hai. It's powerful, almost too powerful. Showing Éowyn this capable here would have weakened her defining moment at the Pelennor Fields in Return of the King. Her entire arc builds toward that one pivotal scene. However, this wasn't the only moment that was held back. But it also meant we lost something else from that battle. A moment where the defenders didn't just survive, they pushed back. And it starts with a sound. One pretty cool deleted idea, mentioned in the commentary but never filmed, has Gimli blowing the horn of Helm Hammerhand, unleashing a blast so powerful it cuts straight through the Uruks. Across the battlefield, they drop their weapons, clutch their heads, overwhelmed by the sound. An army that felt unstoppable all night is suddenly shaken. In the final film, the horn still sounds and the charge follows, but the Uruks never truly falter until Gandalf arrives. There's no moment where the defenders decisively push back on their own. Gandalf's arrival plays more like a rescue than a shared victory. The horn could have marked that shift, the tide turning earned by those still standing inside the walls. These weren't just deleted scenes. They were different versions of a story we thought we knew. Darker choices, braver choices, sadder ones. Somehow, across 12 hours of film, Jackson got almost all of them right. If I missed one that deserved a spot, drop it in the comments. And if you want more dives like this, like and subscribe. There's a lot more Middle-earth to dig through.